What if there was a punishment that was actually worse than death? A sentence where a quick ending is a mercy you are actively and methodically denied. Imagine you're stripped naked, not just for humiliation, but as the first step in a monstrous process. You're trapped between two hollowed-out boats, bound so tightly they become a second skin, with only your head, hands, and feet sticking out. Then, you're force-fed a sickeningly sweet mix of milk and honey, not to feed you, but to turn your own body against itself. Left to bake in the hot sun or float on a foul, stagnant marsh, you become a living feast. Swarms of insects, drawn by the sweet stench, crawl, bite, and burrow into your skin. This isn't a nightmare from a horror movie. For some, this was allegedly a real method of execution. This was Scaphism. History is filled with absolutely horrific ways to punish people. From crucifixion to being flayed alive, the past is a gruesome catalogue of retribution. But among all of them, one alleged practice from the ancient Persian Empire stands out for its uniquely drawn-out and psychological cruelty. Scaphism. Also known as the boats, the name comes from the Greek word scaphi, meaning anything hollowed out. It was a method designed not just to kill, but to completely dehumanize a person, turning their living body into a breeding ground for vermin while they remained conscious for as long as possible. It represents a chilling crossroads of state-sponsored punishment and the inescapable horrors of nature. But to really understand the terror of this punishment, we have to turn to the most famous, and perhaps only, detailed account of its use, the story of a soldier whose one mistake led him to an end so unimaginably vile it has echoed through the centuries. Picture this. It's 401 BC in the Achaemenid Persian Empire during a massive civil war at the Battle of Cunaxa. King Artaxerxes II is fighting a rebellion led by his own younger brother, Cyrus the Younger. In the chaos of the fight, a young Persian soldier named Mithridates manages to kill Cyrus, ending the rebellion and securing the king's rule. Now, King Artaxerxes wanted all the glory for himself. He ordered Mithridates to tell no one, creating an official story that he alone had struck down his brother. For a while, Mithridates kept his mouth shut, rewarded for his deed and his silence. But we all know how secrets, especially those soaked in glory and wine, tend to spill. During a royal banquet full of drunken confidence, Mithridates boasted to the entire court that it was his hand, not the king's, that had ended the war. And that was a fatal mistake. When word got back to Artaxerxes, his fury was absolute. This wasn't just breaking a promise, it was a public humiliation, a direct challenge to the king's power. A simple, quick death wouldn't do. The punishment had to fit the crime. The king, according to the Greek historian Plutarch, decreed that Mithridates would be put to death in the boats. He was sentenced to Scaphism, a fate that would make him wish for the clean, swift death of the battlefield he had survived. What happened next to Mithridates, as detailed by Plutarch, is a methodical descent into a living hell. Scaphism wasn't just an act, it was a process, a carefully engineered nightmare. First, the device itself. The victim was laid inside a narrow boat or a hollowed-out tree trunk. A second boat was placed on top and bolted shut, creating a crude, coffin-like prison. This container was designed to be constricting, but with holes carved out so the victim's head, hands, and feet protruded, leaving them exposed. Next came the force feeding. Executioners would pour a rich mixture of milk and honey into the victim's mouth until they were filled to the point of sickness. This had two goals. First, the overload of sugar and lactose was guaranteed to cause violent, uncontrollable diarrhea. Second, that same sticky, sweet mixture was smeared all over their exposed face and limbs. Every inch of exposed skin became a glistening lure. The ghastly capsule was then taken to a place where nature's scavengers thrive, either left to bake under the sun or, more commonly, set afloat on a stagnant marsh. And here the real horror would begin. The smell of honey and milk, now mixed with sweat, was an irresistible invitation. Swarms of flies and other insects would descend, covering the victim's face until it was a writhing black mass. As the days crawled by, the internal horror would begin. Trapped inside the boat, the victim had no choice but to lie in their own accumulating filth. The sealed container filled with excrement, creating a putrid soup. This, combined with the festering honey, attracted a new, more horrific wave of visitors. Worms and other vermin would begin to breed in the corruption, burrowing into the flesh through any opening they could find, consuming the victim from the inside out. Crucially, the torture was designed to be long. Every day, the executioners would return to force-feed the victim more milk and honey, ensuring they didn't die too quickly from dehydration or starvation. This daily ritual was a reset button on their suffering, providing just enough fuel to keep them alive for the next 24 hours of agony. The body began to decay while still alive. Insect bites would become infected, leading to gangrene. For Mithridates, this ordeal is said to have lasted 17 agonizing days before he finally died. The physical agony of Scaphism is almost impossible to imagine, but what about the psychological torment? Scaphism was a punishment of total helplessness. Bound and immobilized, the victim was a conscious observer of their own gruesome end. They couldn't swat away the flies crawling into their eyes. They couldn't scratch the maddening itch of 1,000 bites. They couldn't escape the filth they were forced to lie in. Think about the mental state of a person enduring this. The first few days would be a blur of pain, heat, and thirst. But as time dragged on, the mind itself would begin to fracture. The constant buzzing would be a relentless soundtrack to their decay. The stench of their own rotting flesh and waste would be an inescapable assault. Delirium would surely set in, blurring the line between the waking nightmare and fevered dreams. This wasn't a punishment that happened to you. It was a process you were forced to live through, second by second, day by day. The daily arrival of the executioners with more milk and honey wasn't mercy. It was a confirmation that the nightmare wasn't over. It was a reminder that your survival was being intentionally manipulated just to prolong the agony. This systematic dismantling of a human being, reducing them to a living, feeling vessel for filth, was the ultimate cruelty of Scaphism. After hearing all of that, you have to ask, is this story even real? Or is it a masterful piece of historical horror fiction? The truth is, the historicity of Scaphism is hotly debated. Our main and most detailed source is the Greek writer Plutarch. A later Byzantine historian also described it, but his account was based entirely on Plutarch's work. The biggest problem is that Plutarch was writing centuries after the events he described, and he was likely relying on the stories of an even earlier Greek physician named Ctesias, a writer known for his love of exaggeration and wild tales. Most importantly, there are no known Persian sources that mention Scaphism. It's completely absent from their own legal codes and records. While Persian justice could be incredibly brutal, with documented punishments like flaying and impalement, the elaborate, almost theatrical cruelty of Scaphism doesn't appear in their side of the story. For these reasons, many historians believe the story of Scaphism is likely a form of anti-Persian propaganda. The Greeks and Persians were bitter rivals, and painting the Persians as decadent, barbaric tyrants was a common tactic in Greek writing. Scaphism was the perfect story to demonize their enemies and reinforce a sense of their own cultural superiority. So it's very possible that Scaphism was never a standard form of execution. The story of Mithridates might have been a gross exaggeration, a one-off punishment for a unique crime, or a complete fabrication. Whether fact or fiction, the story of Scaphism has survived as one of history's most terrifying concepts. It's a chilling testament to the human capacity for cruelty and the use of punishment not just for justice, but as a tool of psychological warfare. The story was crafted to inspire absolute fear and paint an enemy in the most monstrous light possible. It forces us to confront the darkest corners of the human imagination and the terrifying lengths power can go to assert its dominance. The legacy of Scaphism is a haunting reminder of how nature itself can be turned into a weapon, and how a slow, conscious decay can be a punishment far worse than a simple death. So I have a question for you all down in the comments. Do you think the severity of a punishment can ever truly match the weight of a crime? Let us know what you think. And if you found this look into one of history's darkest chapters fascinating, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more explorations into the shadows of the past. Thanks for watching.